All right, so let's get into the vertical diet. So I did this for 5 weeks, and I'm going to tell people about my results here, and then I want to get your thought process and kind of how you developed it. So I mean, as you talked about, pumping a bunch of broccoli and protein powder and all sorts of things that can cause some digestional issues. I was on this for 5 full weeks. I started at almost 209 pounds. I went up to 4,000 calories after, I think, a couple of weeks. I sent you a note and I was at like 3,500, and I went up to 4,000 calories. I lost 4.5 pounds. I got leaner and I got stronger, and my blood pressure was completely fine from probably having 5,000 or 6,000 milligrams of sodium a day, where I was going from the okay, and I was a model for a while, so I was going like 1,500, maybe 2,000 milligrams of sodium a day because I didn't want to get bloated. And I really wasn't worried about blood pressure issues. It was really interesting to see what happened to me about adding these things in there. And I was having literally a couple pounds of rice a day, white rice. I mean, I was just sucking that stuff down, about 200-ish grams of protein a day. And these had 0.3 to 0.4 grams of fat per pound. Yeah, and I got leaner. And even we're crashing with my in-laws. So we sold our place in downtown Chicago, and my father-in-law, I walked down the steps one day and he's like, I better not make you mad because you look like you're just getting stronger and bigger. He's like, what in the hell are you doing? I'm like, it's just this diet that I'm on. Like I felt really strong, and it was really interesting to see what happened. I kind of did a poll from everybody, on my Instagram. And a lot of people thought I'd get a lot bigger. Some people thought I would put on some fat, but I didn't think, even from my whole background in, fitness and nutrition, it was really interesting to see when I had 4,000 calories, about 600 grams of carbohydrates a day, predominantly from white rice, some potatoes, maybe I had some blueberries, but that was pretty much the carbs. And if you're including carrots, right? And some cranberry and maybe a little bit of orange juice. But a lot of those things that I mentioned, your average fitness or nutrition professional once said, don't drink juice, the white rice, you're not having that, right? You're stripping out the fiber and you have the insulin response. Wait a minute, you're taking 500 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium pre and post workout. There's a lot of things in this diet that your average dietitian or fitness expert wouldn't recommend. So if you want to touch on that, I know I asked you a lot of stuff there, but it's really interesting to see what happened to my body.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. I will say that I learned a lot from personal experience, trial and error, over 30 years of competing, both in powerlifting and bodybuilding. I've bulked up to over 300 pounds to powerlift, and I've dieted down certainly many, many times to probably less than 5% body fat to compete as an IFBB pro bodybuilder. And I've done it many, many ways over the years, dirty bulks to over restrictive dieting, which is both still the most common method used on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I weighed not just weight loss and weight gain. I weighed that against the quality of my physique and the performance, because obviously as a powerlifter, you have to perform.
Yeah.
And how much lean body mass I gained or lost, and how much fat I gained or lost, and how I felt and how it affected my strength and performance throughout each of those diets. Many, many times I tried a low carb, keto, less than 50 grams of carbs to get ready for a bodybuilding show. And many, many times I tried the pizza, pasta, pancakes, seafood diet, a gallon of milk a day to bulk. And throughout my career, I've had over 150 blood tests. So not only was I able to make some observations about the way I looked and the way I felt, but I was able to see what the blood work, how that changed depending on what type of diet I was on. So I learned a lot. We didn't have the internet back then. There's a lot of things that have happened in research over the last 5 to 10 years that have confirmed a lot of what I think bodybuilders already discovered. And most of the professionals are quick to say that the bros were right. The guys that were training back in the early 90s, some of the most successful ones, were doing a lot of the right things.
Yeah.
I will say that I didn't invent everything in this diet. Vince Garanda was talking about much of the foundation of this diet back in the 60s when he was working with a lot of the best bodybuilders in the world, including Arnold Schwarzenegger. So you're right. Gurus now will typically say, avoid red meat, avoid dairy, avoid fruit, and avoid salt. Very common. And then they'll have you walk out of their office, or the nutritionist will assign you this diet that is composed of egg whites, tilapia, tons of cruciferous vegetables. And that's generally about it, along with an enormous amount of cardio daily. And restricted, of course, as we mentioned, from sodium. So what I discovered is that when I was dieting on those restrictive diets, and I've done boneless, skinless chicken breast and egg whites and broccoli many times, I was very hungry. I lost a lot of energy and strength. And just because I was eating a lot of calories, I didn't experience what women experience with those restrictive diets, but I trained women as far back as the late 80s, and more recently up to including third place Miss Olympia Nadia Wyatt, along with a lot of other competitive women in the fitness figure bikini industry and just in the general health environment, what they experience on the restrictive diets, egg whites, whitefish, and broccoli, are a host of problems. The biggest one is the female triad: anemia, low iron, amenorrhea, cessation of the menstrual period, osteoporosis, which we actually saw in the runners I used to train back at the University of Oregon in the early 90s, would manifest itself in shin splints, were quite common in women who would over-restrict their diets and end up with some degree of osteoporosis. And there was a huge news article recently about an Oregon coach who was training for Nike and their distance runners having a host of those kinds of problems. So it's not like it's something that used to happen. It's still very common. It's even more common now that the industry has exploded over the last 5 to 7 years. There's so many more people competing in bodybuilding, figure, physique, and bikini. And so we see a lot more of these problems. We see, to the exclusion of egg yolks and biotin for skin, hair, and nails, women suffer from dry skin and dry hair. And in the absence of adequate iodine, which is often the uptake is blocked by those cruciferous vegetables, these women suffer from hypothyroidism, and then that dry skin, that dry hair starts falling out. These are common problems in the bikini fitness figure industry that I see, every day because I'm in this industry. And so that's the shortcoming of the over-restriction. On one end, you're tired, you're hungry, it manifests in micronutrient deficiencies and health problems, as I just detailed. On the flip side, my big athletes, the bodybuilders and powerlifters in the off season, the strongmen, even the offensive linemen in football. I've been training linemen in football since the mid 90s when I was working with the Rose Bowl winning University of Oregon football team in 1995.
Nice.
These guys tend to just go carte blanche on the seafood diet. I eat every time I see food. And they end up with some degree of fatty liver disease and metabolic syndrome. This was what happened when Hafthor contacted me 4 years ago for help. He said he was getting fatter. He wasn't getting stronger. Well, I lived that, having bulked up to over 300 pounds many times back as early as, I think, 1995 was the first time I got over 300 pounds. And then periodically, throughout my powerlifting career, I would go back and forth from powerlifting to bodybuilding. So I would bulk up, diet down, bulk up, diet down. And so, and I did it many, many ways, as mentioned, and learned what was the right and wrong ways to do it based on how the results that I achieved. And so I immediately knew when Hafthor came to me what the problem was, and I'd seen it with Mark Bell, and I'd seen it with many other athletes over the years. He had metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, fatty liver disease, high cholesterol, obviously, and he was partitioning nutrients primarily towards fat at that point. And he wasn't insulin sensitive, and so he was having a difficult time, with water retention, gas and bloating, digestive issues, which I've experienced throughout my career. And so it was a pretty easy fix for me. It was kind of why I designed the vertical diet some 10 years ago with the information that I had learned throughout my career and the coaches I had worked with. And so I sent that information to Hafthor, and almost immediately, at least initially, we started with a little bit of weight loss to try and get that fatty liver resolved. Brought his blood pressure down, improved his blood sugars, got him a CPAP for sleep, got him vitamin D3, insulin sensitivity, and all of that. And then we changed the compositions of the foods that he ate, and we implemented those 10-minute walks after each meal, and he was able to regain the weight without gaining as much fat. He became much more muscular and stronger as a result of being able to partition those nutrients, into the muscle instead of into fat storage. So that kind of, in a long-winded sense, is the history and where we are currently with the diet. The biggest piece now has been transitioning from athletics into mainstream, into the dad bods and soccer moms, who unfortunately see these women on the bikini stage in the best shape of their life and start trying to follow their diets.
Right.
And so now we're seeing all of these problems in the general public. These women end up at the doctor's office getting shots for iron and B12 and D3 and glutathione and all of those things, and thyroid medication because they're depressed and tired and their hair's falling out and they lost a ton of muscle trying to follow these guru diets. And so I'm proposing there's a better way that is healthier, is better for satiation, for mitigating the loss of energy, to maintaining strength and retaining more lean body mass. And that's what the fundamentals are of the vertical diet.